Alright people, so welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our current affairs lecture series. Now in this lecture series, we will cover a particular day's current affairs within 30 minutes. Now today we are going to cover current affairs from 14th of August. So all the important news items that featured in today's newspapers shall be covered in this lecture. Needless to say this, you have to make this lecture series a part of your daily routine, because if you don't, then you won't have a hold over current affairs. And if you don't have any hold over current affairs, well, you will miss out on 50% of your paper, whether it's prelims or mains. Therefore, current affairs are extremely important. You all already know about it. So make this lecture series a part of your daily routine. Alright then, enough of the introduction. Let's straight away dive into today's lecture. But first, let's take a look at the list of topics that we shall cover today. Okay, so let's begin. So daily current affairs, 14th August, and here are the topics. Topic number 1 is with respect to Bodh Gaya Temple Act 1949, because Buddhist Society of India is opposing it. So we'll talk about this. Then we all are familiar with Strait of Hormuz crisis. Now there is another strait that is problematic, and that is because of Russia-Ukraine war, the Kerch Strait crisis. Okay, so we'll talk about this. Then, well, there is a web series on Netflix called Operation Safed Sagar, which talks about the Air Force operations during Kargil war. Now they conducted a very important photo reese mission. So what are photo reese missions? What did the Air Force do back then in Kargil war? We'll talk about this. Okay, it's related to science and technology, so you have to pay close attention. Then, well, there was this editorial with respect to J&K's statehood demand, because Jammu and Kashmir is currently a UT, but there are demands for restoring full statehood to J&K. We'll talk about this. And in the end, we'll talk about evolution of environmental jurisprudence in India. Okay, so these are the 5 topics that we shall zero in our attention on. So let's start discussing them one by one. Starting with topic number 1, and that is Bodh Gaya Temple Act 1949. Now here is the story. Listen to it very carefully. You see, you all are familiar with Bodh Gaya, okay, a place in Bihar which is the holiest site for all Buddhists in the world, right? Because it is that very place where Siddhartha Gautam attained nirvana under the Bodhi tree. So Bodh Gaya is important for Buddhists all over the world. Now, to regulate the temple in Bodh Gaya, there is this law in India called Bodh Gaya Temple Act 1949. Okay, and as per that act, a committee would run the temple complex. That committee should have 4 Hindus, 4 Buddhists. Okay, now Hindus also have some stake in that area. Okay, that is why there was this compromise committee that was created to manage this temple. Hindus and Buddhists both have a stake in it. But people from Buddhist Society of India have issues with this, okay, and they want to repeal Bodh Gaya Temple Act. Now, what is their argument? What is government's argument? You need to be familiar with this, because it is a very important issue. It involves fundamental rights, it involves Constitution of India, it involves everything, and religious freedom as well, minority rights as well. So pay close attention to this issue, okay? So let's begin. So Bodh Gaya Temple Act 1949. So the issue has been raised by Buddhist Society of India in the Honorable Supreme Court. But the Honorable Supreme Court has deferred the matter until, well, the judgment on Sabrimala case is delivered. Now Sabrimala is a temple, okay, and a very important case is being discussed with respect to the management of this temple. And Sabrimala temple, to adjudicate this matter, there is a 9-judge constitution bench. So obviously this Sabrimala temple issue is going to resolve some constitutional issues. That is why the Supreme Court has said that our final verdict on Bodh Gaya temple complex would depend on what this constitution bench has to say about Sabrimala temple management, because it will resolve various constitutional issues, and those constitutional issues are important to deliver a judgment in this case. Clear? So this is the entire issue. Now, to understand this issue, you have to understand Bodh Gaya Temple Act. Okay, so here is the timeline, brief timeline. So Bodh Gaya Temple Governance Pipeline. So in 1949, remember it is 1949, before our constitution. So technically speaking, this law, Bodh Gaya Temple Act, is basically a pre-constitutional law. Okay, now this law was enacted so as to create balance between Buddhists and Shaivites, because they also have a claim over this site. Okay, and as per that balance, what would happen? This temple complex would be run by a 8-member committee. 4 would be Hindus, 4 Buddhists. The district magistrate shall act as the ex officio chairperson of this committee, and this DM has to be a Hindu. If he is not a Hindu, then the state would appoint someone, a Hindu, as the chairperson. So this is something that, well, the Buddhist Society of India is objecting to. They have filed a case in the Honorable Supreme Court that this law violates Article 13, Article 14, Article 25, Article 26, Article 29 of the Constitution. And therefore, they want to repeal this law. Okay, declare it void ab initio, which means unconstitutional. Now, the Supreme Court has deferred the matter because certain concepts which are required to give a judgment on this matter, well, the Supreme Court needs clarity on that. Okay, certain constitutional issues need to be clarified before delivering a judgment on this, and that is why Supreme Court has said we will deliver a judgment on this after the 9-judge Constitution bench would deliver their final verdict on Sabarimala temple issue. Yes, makes sense? So this is the simple matter. This is the controversy. Now, to understand it a bit better, you need to have some historical background as far as Bodh Gaya temple complex is concerned. So Bodh Gaya, the holy Bodhi tree, well, it is the enlightenment site of Siddhartha Gautam, Mahatma Bodh, right? And when Ashoka became the emperor of the Mauryan dynasty or the Mauryan empire, well, he created a temple complex around that Bodhi tree. So Prince Siddhartha attained Nirvana under that Bodhi tree, and Ashoka later on created a temple complex to honor that achievement. Okay, now that temple complex, remember this part, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site also. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Clear? Now what happened was in India between 13th to 19th century, Buddhism declined considerably. Okay, I mean Buddhism almost was wiped out from India. During this time, well, Hindu Shaivite monastery flourished in that, close to that temple complex. A Hindu Shaivite mutt known as Bodh Gaya mutt with a Mahant started managing that. Clear? And it became a Shaivite site. For 700 years, it became a Shaivite site. Then in 19th century, because Buddhism, though got wiped out from India, was flourishing in Sri Lanka. So there is this person, Angarika Dharampal, who is known as the revivalist of Buddhism. Well, in the late 19th century, Sri Lankan Buddhist revivalist Dharampal founded Mahabodhi Society and presented a lot of legal and political challenges, okay, and wanted to revive. He led many legal and political movements, and it was his efforts that led to the claim of Buddhist back on the temple complex. Okay, now there is this conflict between Shaivite traditions and Buddhists. So the government took the middle path. Okay, they created this compromise formula, and under this compromise formula, 8-member committee would manage Mahabodhi temple. Okay, so what are the major provisions of this act? Okay, this law. Section 3 defines how would the committee be composed of. I mean, it defines that there will be 8-member committee, 4 Hindus would be there, 4 Buddhists would be there. So this formula is given in section 3. The chairperson and secretary, well, chairperson should be the district magistrate if he is a Hindu. That is given here. Section 11 allows people from this Shaivite tradition to do various religious ceremonies over there, like Pinddan and all. That was completely allowed. Shaivite worship and Pinddan, these Hindu ritualistic ceremonies, they were allowed. Section 13 exempted these Shaivite monastery. Okay, this Bodh Gaya mutt, it exempted them from any state interference in case of their movable and immovable property. So they were exempted. Okay, and if the state finds out that there is mismanagement by this committee, the committee can be dissolved by the state. So these are the key provisions. Now, the Buddhist Society of India challenges this on what basis? They say that it is violative of the Constitution. And which provisions of the Constitution? Well, they say it is violative of Article 13. How Article 13? Well, Article 13 clearly says that any law, okay, that violates Constitution shall be unconstitutional. Any pre-constitutional law shall be declared void ab initio if it violates the principle of the Constitution. So they are challenging this law, saying that it violates the Constitution. So this is where Article 13 comes in. Okay, Article 13 allows you to challenge pre-constitutional laws. So they are using this. Then they are saying Article 14 is also getting violated, which is right to equality. Well, if Hindus, Muslims are allowed to manage their religious properties by themselves, why shouldn't Buddhists be allowed that? So they have said that. Then Article 25 is freedom of religion. Article 26 is any religious denomination has the right to manage its own affairs and their movable, immovable property. Okay, so this is with respect to religious freedom. And Article 29 is related to minority rights. All religious minorities are allowed to preserve their culture as per their own rules. So they say it is violative of that. And Article 49 binds the government. It is a DPSP. It says that it is the duty of the state to protect monuments of cultural importance. So it is a monument, UNESCO World Heritage Site. Plus they say Buddhists and Hindus are different. So why should there be a joint temple committee? Okay, it is the most important temple for Buddhists. So this is the challenge that they have presented. Now, in your notes, I have presented this table which compares management of religious institutions by different religions. Okay, so Bodh Gaya Temple Act is used for Bodh Gaya Temple Complex. For Sikhs, there is Sikh Gurudwara Committee Act, SGPC. For Muslims, it's Waqf Act. For Hindus, there are separate Hindu endowment laws. Okay, so this comparison is given table by table, I mean clause by clause. Okay, provision by provision. So do check it out. It's very easy to understand. And then why are we talking about Sabrimala? Why have we postponed it until Sabrimala? Because Sabrimala will help us define what is a religious denomination who is guaranteed Article 26. What is the proper definition? Okay, then, you know, state cannot interfere with your religion. But way back, the Supreme Court in Shirir Mutt case said that only essential religious practices are protected from state interference. Now, what constitutes essential religious practice? The courts are going to define this as well. Okay, and the courts are also going to clear their stand on pre-constitutional religious laws after Sabrimala judgment. So this is why we are waiting for Sabrimala judgment. Make sense? Complete sense? This is the issue, right? Now let's quickly shift our focus to next news item, and that is the Kerch Strait crisis. We all are aware of the Strait of Hormuz crisis. Because of this crisis, well, India's economy was suffering. And how was it suffering? It is because of inflation in food and fuel prices, because there were severe food and fuel shortages. Yes, a similar crisis is brewing in Europe. Okay, similar crisis is happening in Europe, and that is because of Russia-Ukraine war. Because of Russia-Ukraine war, there is this narrow strait, okay, which is important for exports from Russia and Ukraine. This narrow strait is blocked because of Russia-Ukraine war. And this has led to extreme volatility in food and fuel prices in Europe. Though Europe is also suffering because of climate change, this extreme volatility in food and fuel prices because of climate change, Europe is suffering because of that. But these wars, geopolitics do have a big role to play. Now, what is this Kerch Strait? Okay, how Europe is being impacted, how food and fuel prices are being impacted by both geopolitical and climatic factors. We talk about this entire issue. So let's begin, okay? So the Kerch Strait crisis. First of all, you need to be able to locate Kerch Strait, okay? So this is Ukraine, this is Russia, this is the Sea of Azov, this is Crimea. Now, Crimea was once part of Ukraine, but it was occupied by Russia in 2014. So now it's Russian territory. Now, this is Crimea, this is Sea of Azov, and this is Black Sea. Black Sea is connected to Sea of Azov through this Kerch Strait. There are various ports in Russia and Ukraine which export a lot of food grains, fuel, fertilizers, and these ships cross Kerch Strait to reach Black Sea, and from Black Sea they cross Bosphorus Strait, which connects Black Sea to Mediterranean Sea, and from Mediterranean Sea they can go to Europe, India, anywhere. Okay, because of Suez Canal, Red Sea route, all of that is there. So this Kerch Strait, very narrow but very important. Okay, this is in troubled waters. Okay, the metaphor is apt. This is in troubled waters because of Russia-Ukraine conflict, which, well, it is not ending, right? Now, because of this, well, food and fuel prices. Okay, let me write it properly. Food and fuel prices are extremely volatile, and this volatility is because of supply issues, supply shortages. And why is there any supply shortage? Because of two things. Two factors are responsible for this volatility and this disruption in supply. Number one is climate. Okay, because of climate, food crops, there are problems because of that. Heat waves in Europe, forest fires in Europe, we all are hearing about that. and the other is geopolitics, especially Russia-Ukraine war. Geopolitics, right? Now, what are the core drivers of this problem? Number one, like I said, number two is Russia-Ukraine geopolitical shock. Well, both Ukraine and Russia are known as the breadbasket of Europe. Okay, because together they accounted for nearly 30% of global wheat exports, 20% of corn, and 70% of sunflower oil, which is also imported by India. So these supplies are impacted. Then high natural gas prices, because they also export natural gas. They are resource-rich countries. Now, natural gas, when natural gas becomes expensive, fertilizers become expensive because natural gas is used as a raw material for producing nitrogenous fertilizers. Plus, when energy becomes expensive, diesel, petrol becomes expensive, energy costs rise. Okay, electricity becomes expensive. So all these logistics, because farmers after harvesting their wheat, they have to transport it. But if transportation becomes expensive, it is a problem. This becomes expensive. Okay. Plus, when this war was going on, Kerch Strait was blocked. But to save the world from food and fuel volatility, well, there was this initiative called Black Sea Grain Initiative, which said that Russia and Ukraine can fight their war separately, but they won't stop, or no army would target each other's ports where these exports are happening, so that the global economy does not suffer. Well, this is out for a toss. Now this grain initiative no longer exists. So this is the reason. Plus, it's not just geopolitics, climate has a role to play. Recurrent European droughts are happening, forest fires are happening, then specialty crop shocks. Successive historic droughts in Mediterranean basin halved regions' olive oil yields, triggering unprecedented price spikes across retail markets. And then global teleconnections. Climate extremes in Europe coincided with irregular monsoon distribution in South Asia and drought conditions across America. So the global agriculture is suffering yield losses. Okay, yield losses are common in the entire globe because the world is suffering climatic shocks. Okay, this is the thing. Now, here is a proper flow chart. How food inflation gets transmitted to us. So first of all, primary commodity shocks. Okay, supply of wheat, maize, vegetable oils, well, that fertilizers. Well, there is supply shock, so there is inflation. Then logistics cost also increases. Transportation, packaging, labor costs, they all rise. And then finally, the final retail price, the price at which we buy from the vegetable markets, okay, that also increases. And there is one problem, okay. Whenever raw material becomes expensive, final prices becomes expensive. So whenever raw wheat would become expensive, the wheat we purchase would also become extremely expensive. But when the prices would come down, final price doesn't come down because the food companies, well, this is known as greedflation. This is the time for them to increase their profits. So when raw material prices, raw wheat's prices would come down, they won't reduce their final price because they want to earn more profit. Okay, so this happens. So final retail inflation is pretty sticky. Clear? Makes sense? Now, how you might think that this is all great. I know a lot of things now, but this is impacting Europe. How would it impact India? Well, it definitely impacts India, and here is how. Okay, fertilizer subsidy and fiscal management. Now, fertilizer cost would increase, and Government of India provides subsidy to farmers. If the market price would increase, the government has guaranteed a price to farmers. If market price would increase, well, government subsidy burden would also increase. Fiscal burden is there. Government's import cost would increase. Then we are import dependent on edible oil. And remember, I told you, sunflower oil was exported from Russia and Ukraine. India buys a lot of sunflower oil. Well, if their supplies would be restricted, there would be heavy inflation. We would suffer. And then defensive trade interventions. Rising global food insecurity prompted India to implement strategic export restrictions. India stopped exports because it wanted its own grains to be for its own people. So that is there. Okay, so it harms the overall global trade. Make sense? Now, what is the way forward for India? Build climate resilient agriculture so your yield losses are protected, your farmers are protected. Okay, do some research in climate resilient agricultural techniques. Then diversify agro input sourcing. Diversify your sources. Don't be dependent on one or two countries. Diversify your fertilizer, natural gas sources. Then enhance strategic food reserves, the buffer stock of food grains. So if supply is restricted from any country, you have those stocks. and strengthen circular bio-inputs, biofertilizers, rather than depending on chemical fertilizers which are dependent on natural gas. Use biofertilizers, and for that the government launched PM Pranam scheme. It is good for soil fertility, it reduces our import dependence, win-win, right? That's about it. Now let's quickly shift our focus to next news item, and that is Operation Safed Sagar photo Recce missions. Now listen to me very carefully. It is a short news item, but it's pretty technical. You can find it on Netflix. There is this new web series called Operation Safed Sagar. Operation Safed Sagar was basically an Air Force operation during Kargil War. And you all know the history of Kargil War. What happened in the Kargil War? Well, deceptively, Pakistani army occupied certain heights within the territory of India across LOC. Okay, deceptively, breaking all law, all morality, all ethicality. Okay, and they disguised these Pakistani soldiers as mujahideens. Later, they had to admit it. Okay, that was the case. Now, these soldiers occupied significant heights, and in military, well, all generals believe that, well, if the enemy is sitting atop a hill, it is very difficult to occupy because height gives you advantage. So these Pakistani soldiers were at advantageous positions, and our army was finding it really difficult to occupy those peaks. Therefore, Air Force was used. Now, the initial Air Force operation was reconnaissance, gather intelligence. Where are their bunkers? Where are their sangars? Where are they hiding? How many soldiers are there? So for that, well, a particular squad in the Indian Air Force called Golden Arrows, well, they conducted Recce missions, reconnaissance missions. Their fighter jets were basically, they had attached cameras. So they would click pictures, and then finally when they'll come to the base, they would analyze those pictures and identify where are these, what are the enemy, what is the enemy position. Okay, they would locate enemy positions so that they can inform army infantry for a successful coordination, right? Now, that Operation Safed Sagar proved pivotal for the success of Indian Army in Kargil War. And this is all explained in the web series. But for us, we need to understand what are Recce missions. Okay, so let's talk about it. So Operation Safed Sagar photo Recce missions. So that is why they were in the news. The media spotlight on this operation has highlighted the critical lesser known role of Indian Air Force. Everyone talks about the Indian Army for Kargil War, but Indian Air Force did play a very important role, and they conducted these photo Recce missions. So what did they do? Well, their MiGs and Jaguar fighter jets were equipped with cameras. Okay, their job was target acquisition, locate enemy positions, mapped fortified mountain bunkers so that you can drop. So you would locate their bunkers and give GPS coordinates, and you would use those GPS coordinates to drop laser guided bombs on them. This was their job. Then strategic restraint. This was a very important feature because there were strict instructions to the Indian Armed Forces that they would not cross the LOC. Now that made their job even more difficult. Okay, if they were allowed to cross the LOC, they would have conducted this mission very well, but this increased their difficulty. And their next job was battle damage assessment. So whenever RT shells, artillery shells destroyed a particular post of Pakistani army, well, the Indian Air Force would fly over it to check whether it has actually destroyed or not and inform that to the infantry. So that was also done. Clear? Now, what are photo Recce missions? So this is what the Indian Air Force did. But what is the definition of photo Recce missions? What do you do by clicking these pictures? Okay. So you gather pre-strike intelligence and target localization. We have discussed this. Operation Safed Sagar was all about it. Okay, locate enemy positions so that you can drop bombs on them. Then battle damage assessment. You have dropped Bofor shells, artillery shells on them. You need to assess what damage has been caused to the enemy and inform the ground troops. Then terrain and route reconnaissance. Because you need to map the terrain. Are there any roads to reach that mountain? You need to map the entire terrain and share it with the army, the ground troops, for a successful operation. And then if there is a helicopter crash, your pilot is dying, is lying over there stranded, for search and rescue operations of crash helicopters and fighter jets, which also happened during the Kargil War. So this is what the photo Recce missions are for. Now here's the thing, and this is very important for you to know. You see, back then in 1999, our technology level was really low. Okay, we were equipped with low quality cameras. Our fighter jets were equipped with low quality cameras. But today, our fighter jets are equipped with high-tech cameras. So today's photo Reese missions are dramatically more advanced than what we had during 1999. So here is a comparison of that. So Kargil era technology level, modern warfare. So we use photographic film for that. Okay, now we use digital cameras. Now these photographic films, you had to develop the film, chemical processing, and the final photograph would come in the evening after 4, 5, 6 hours. Now it comes real time. Then those cameras did not have all weather capability. Cloud cover or snow glare, darkness would destroy your picture taking ability. Not the case anymore. Then these were the sensors that were used. Now it is better. And now your cameras are also AI assisted. A technology which nobody heard of during the Kargil war. Okay. So we are remarkably ahead now from 1999. Plus, now you can do these Reese missions using drones or space satellites. So some people are saying, now why do you need fighter jets for Reese missions? Now UAVs and satellites can do it. But still, you still need fighter jets for Reese missions. Why? Because UAVs and satellites have some disadvantages. What are those disadvantages? First of all, well, if we talk about UAVs, overcoming drone vulnerability, these UAVs excel in low-threat counter-insurgency environments. They remain slow, vulnerable in high-intensity wars, and anyone can shoot them down. Okay, so this is there. This is the vulnerability. When it comes to satellite, well, satellite cannot stay over one place permanently. Okay, they have particular timelines. Okay, so for example, at 4 o'clock in the evening, a satellite would fly over you. This is what low Earth orbit satellites are. So if the enemy knows your satellite routine, they can easily disguise their bunker positions and all. Okay, so this is a problem. That is why you need fighter jet also. So you need all three. Here, a fighter edge. Modern fighter aircrafts equipped with advanced electronic warfare suits, radar, warning receiver, high-speed dash capability can enter contested airspace. So if anybody tries to shoot you down, you can maneuver. Okay, execute photo Reese runs and survive. So they are still a better option. Clear? This is the thing. That's all you need to know as far as this news item is concerned. And now let's quickly talk about the next news item, and that is J&K's statehood demand. Okay, let's cover this news item very quickly. So you all know that J&K was converted into a union territory. First of all, Ladakh was separated from it in 2019. Article 370 was scrapped, and J&K was given the status of union territory, but a union territory like Pondicherry or Delhi with a legislature, chief minister and all. But people from J&K have been demanding full statehood. Okay, so there was this editorial in the Indian Express talking about the pros and cons of granting full statehood to J&K. So let's talk about it very quickly. Okay, so J&K statehood demand. So you all know about this. Okay, now first let's talk about the entire evolution of J&K. Remember, until 2019, J&K included Jammu, Kashmir Valley and Ladakh region. After 2019, J&K Reorganization Act was passed. You created J&K, which was given the status of UT with a legislature, and Ladakh, which is just a UT like Andaman, Lakshadweep, without a state legislature. Okay, but this state of J&K before 2019, this entire state, well, had certain flip-flops, went through 3 phases. The first phase was autonomy phase, when under Article 370, Jammu and Kashmir was given a unique status. Jammu and Kashmir had its own constitution, had its own flag, okay, within the Indian Union, plus their chief minister was called Prime Minister, Wazir-e-Azam, and their governor would be called President, Sadar-e-Azam. They deliberately opted for this nomenclature. But in 1965, you amended the constitution, made certain amendments and created CM and governor. Okay, so phase 2 was administrative integration and political rupture. So now CM and governor are there, but the pivotal moment was 1987 elections, the start of militancy in Kashmir. And from then onwards, because of insurgency, center's control over J&K became extreme. This went on and on and on, and until 2019, when you completely dissolved J&K state, scrapped Article 370, bifurcated the state, created J&K UT, Ladakh UT, right? Now, post 2019 architecture, Now, some people say that making J&K a UT and not a full state has given us some advantages. What are those advantages? Key gains. First of all, administrative digitization. Various digitization reforms that were going on in the rest of the country were not happening in J&K because of local resistance. Now they could happen. There are digital portals, administrative efficiencies there, infrastructure acceleration, roads, bridges, highways, all-weather tunnels. This is happening. Local bodies. You could now enact Panchayati Raj in J&K. That was done. Plus, there was this huge economic and tourism recovery, though it got dented during the Pahalgam terror attack, but there was this huge tourism boost. So these are the advantages. Plus, security is bit better. Law and order is bit better under central control. But some people criticize it. And what is the criticism? Well, J&K Chief Minister is answerable to the people. Umar Abdullah is answerable to the people. He has to fight elections. But he cannot control law and order in his state because police and law and order are kept under the purview of LG, Lieutenant Governor, and not J&K Chief Minister. So there is this accountability problem. The elected executive, though accountable to people, has no control. So there is this accountability and democratic deficit. This is the main problem. Clear? Now, in your notes, I've given this table that what is the current situation with J&K and what would happen to J&K if it is given full statehood. Okay, law and order, police would come under Chief Minister's control and many other things would be there. Okay, so why are they demanding full statehood? These are the reasons. Now, there are certain suggestions. Okay, number one suggestion is that there are three suggestions, by the way. How can you give statehood to them? First of all is the Big Bang approach. Give them statehood now. All at once. Give them statehood and get it over with. But things are a little bit complicated. Therefore, implement the statehood demand in a phased manner. Give some powers every year so that they are able to, local governments are able to adjust to those powers. Plus, while doing all of this, take care of the administrative needs of people from Jammu Plains and Kashmir Valley because they have distinct demands. Okay? They are distinct people also. So, take care of this concern as well. Clear? That would be all. And now let's quickly talk about the last news item of the day, and that is evolution of environmental jurisprudence. Let's quickly finish this, okay? Because this involves a lot of things that you have to cram, okay? Now, what is environmental jurisprudence? Simply put, well, there was a time when the Honorable Supreme Court of India never used to interfere in environmental matters. They used to say that it is something that executive or parliament would handle. But since the 1970s, Supreme Court became active in environmental jurisdiction. Okay, they started hearing cases with respect to environment, and in 1970s they made right to safe environment a fundamental right also. So Supreme Court was involved. Then there was this another phase when Supreme Court became hyperactive with respect to environmental cases, and they started inculcating best practices of the entire world into Indian environmental law. Then the third phase is also accused of being judicial activism. Certain environmental decisions that should be taken by executive were now also being taken by the Supreme Court only. Now that is something that many people objected to. So now we have entered the fourth phase where the Supreme Court says that all the decisions shall be taken by pollution control boards, the executive. We would ensure that you're taking those decisions properly. Okay, you're doing your job properly. We would ensure just that. So these are the four phases of environmental jurisprudence. So let's talk about it very quickly. Okay, so evolution of environmental jurisprudence. So what are the four phases? Phase 1, the emergence of green PILs, public interest litigations, and it is in this phase, 1980s, not 70s, 80s, when under Article 21, which is right to life, you made right to safe environment a part of it. So now right to safe environment was a fundamental right. Phase 2, ingestion of international environmental doctrines like polluter pay principle, precautionary principle, all these principles were added. Then phase 3 was hyperactive court involvement. And now they are saying that the institutions created for environment like National Green Tribunal, pollution control boards, we would hand over the reins to them. We would just ensure that they are doing their job. This is a phase where judicial activism is a little bit restrained. The Supreme Court is moving back from its phase 3 position. Clear? Now, in your notes, I have given this table. Okay, so various environmental principles that are part of Indian environmental law, like right to clean environment, precautionary principle, polluter pays principle, they were included in environmental law in India through various judgments. So these judgments are also given in your notes. So do go through that, right? Now, why have we entered phase 4? Why was phase 3 wrong? Well, because you cannot allow judiciary to take over the job of the executive or legislature. Okay, why? Especially in case of environment. First of all, environmental disputes are multivariate. They involve a lot of variables which the local governments understand. The judiciary shouldn't be involved in that. So this is the thing. Plus, if Supreme Court is going to take every decision, then what is the use of these pollution control boards, statutory authorities? Their power gets eroded, right? Plus, certain judicial decisions like ban on firecrackers, mining, vehicular restrictions frequently face challenges because judiciary just gives a decision without looking into whether this decision can be implemented or not. The executive, the government knows about it because the government is involved with compliance. The judiciary doesn't, they just pass the judgment without taking care of the compliance part. Hence, the decision should be taken by the executive. So all of this is also given in your notes, right? And that would be all. So with that, we conclude today's session. I know today's session was a bit longer, but we had more topics to cover and I wanted to explain them exhaustively. Nonetheless, make this lecture series a part of your daily routine and stay tuned. Okay, make it a part of your daily routine and please do not forget to revise this lecture from the notes provided by us. Okay then. On that note, I shall take your leave with the promise of seeing you again with another set of news items. Thank you everyone.